Have you ever wondered why the bread has this type of holes? Or why the bakers always left the dough to rest so it's leaven? Let me tell you the short answer of this. It's because alcoholic fermentation. But wait, don't you want to stay and learn what happens inside the dough at the moment of making bread? If curiosity is driving you crazy, get comfortable wherever you are, because I'm going to explain to you what is fermentation, especially talking about the art of making bread. Let's start! All the living beings needs energy to survive. How do you get it? Simple, by eating and breathing. But let's go deeper. How exactly our body produces energy? We owe this to the cells. There are different ways of a cell to produce energy. Of course, we are talking about chemical energy. The one is with the presence of oxygen and the other two with the lack of it. The first scenario is when there is sufficient amount of oxygen to produce energy. This process is called aerobic respiration, and this is the most effective way to produce ATP in the body. The other two is when there is a lack of oxygen, so the microorganisms adapt to survive. They proceed to do the anaerobic respiration, which means the absence of oxygen. Therefore, this process doesn't produce as much ATP as cellular respiration does. We can divide fermentation, which is an anaerobic process, into two: lactic fermentation and alcoholic fermentation. Lactic fermentation is responsible for the production of yogurt and cheese, while alcoholic fermentation is responsible for the production of alcoholic beverages and the bubbles inside the bread. Initially, I thought that I only need to talk about alcoholic fermentation, but after an extensive research, I found that lactic fermentation also plays an important role at the moment of baking, especially when we are talking about sourdough bread that is made of fermented dough. Therefore, I am in the necessity to explain you these two types of fermentation. Both anaerobic processes start with the glycolysis, which in brief words is the stage in which glucose is transformed into 2-pyruvate, which is the conjugated base of pyruvic acid. Besides, glycolysis alone doesn't require oxygen to work. What differs the alcoholic fermentation with the lactic fermentation is what happens with the pyruvate. In lactic fermentation, an enzyme transforms the pyruvic acid into lactic acid. This molecule over here that is a carboxylic acid. If you want to know more about this, I will let you the link over here. While in the alcoholic fermentation, the final product is ethanol and carbon dioxide. The reason why the bread has these holes is because of the alcoholic fermentation. As you may see over here, carbon dioxide is one product of the reaction. So the dough acts as a container that retains the bubbles of the carbon dioxide produced by the reaction. As a result, the dough starts to increase in volume and fluffiness. And what happens with alcohol in the reaction? Well, it just vaporizes. But haven't I mentioned to you that lactic fermentation is also important? Don't you want to know why? Lactic acid enhances the flavor in the bread. Add to it a little bit of salt and basically you will have a bread. Unless you are a professional chef that wants to share your recipe for making bread, judge me and leave it in the comments. Otherwise, let's continue with the video. There are various ways to make bread, and I'm not going deep into that, but I can show you the essence of it. In normal bread, the process of fermentation is carried out by fungus. To be precise, Saccharomyces Cerevisiae. You can use it in active dried yeast or fresh compacted yeast. The thing is that these fungi ferment the sugar present in the flour to carry the process, while in sourdough bread the thing is different. And that's why some people prefer this as a healthier option. As you may know, we are surrounded by microorganisms, including wild yeast and lactic acid bacteria. Lactic acid bacteria, aka LAB, are responsible for lactic fermentation. The thing is that these two microorganisms are greedy when talking about resources. I'm gonna show you an experiment. You can try it if you want. I will do it after this video. You will have to take 50 grams of flour and 50 grams of water. You will mix it with your fingers and you will let it in the kitchen for 2 days. If you are lucky enough and you follow the steps, you will have your sourdough starter, something that will look like this. The thing is that lactic acid bacteria and wild yeast will live symbiotically inside your mix. In other words, LAB says to the wild yeast, watch out bro, why don't we work as a team? And we poison our environment, so less microorganisms steal some food. So yeast creates alcohol and LAB acids, lowering the pH of the leaven and making more difficult to other microorganisms to survive. Some yeast prefer to eat glucose and fructose, while some LAB prefer to eat maltose. So there is no fight for food inside the leaven. At the end, you will have your sourdough started that can be kneaded with flour, salt and water to make your dough. Then you will let it rest so the microorganisms do their job. Finally, you will bake it and you will have your desired bread. Wait, there is something that I almost forgot to tell you. There are two different types of gluten in the flour, glutamine and gliadin. Glutamine makes the dough hold its shape and gliadin allows the dough to stretch. Now you know more about the fermentation inside the bread. But wait, don't leave. I will leave you some tips if you want to prepare bread. Number 1. The higher the protein in the flour, the higher the gluten. So the dough will have a better gas retaining properties and it will look more fluffy. Otherwise, if you choose low quality flour with low quality proteins, your bread will look compact and over dense. Number 2. Cover your dough so you avoid the over fermentation. If that happens, microorganisms have already eaten all the sugar inside the flour, so the flavor will be affected and you will have a dough with a strong smell to alcohol. And that's all for this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe and give me some thumbs up. Thanks for watching.